What is the definition of a migrant and when are different definitions used? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Hi, my name is Melissa Siegel. I'm a professor of migration studies, and this is a channel about all things migration. Let's get into it. So what is the definition of a migrant and when are different definitions used? I'm going to generally talk about two different types of definitions here. So one is what we call a lexical definition, and the other is what we call a statistical definition. So a lexical definition explains how a word is actually used in language. So it broadly describes the ordinary language meaning of a term. Okay, so this is how we use a term in just daily life and practice. And this differs from a statistical definition. So a statistical definition makes categories based on specific population parameters. So it specifies exact measurable criteria used to classify people in data sets. So lexical definitions are often too broad for policy or demographic modeling. And that's why we need the statistical definitions. This basically allows us to be able to measure things like migration stocks, migration flows, and other indicators, to be formally counted, tracked, and compared. An example of a lexical definition is the term migration. So the term migration means the movement of a person away from their place of usual residence, either across an international border or within a state to change their usual place of residence. That is a bit different from the definitions that we see for statistical purposes. So one key challenge to measuring international migration is that definitions used tend to really vary across countries, organizations, and studies. To combat this and to improve global comparability of migration data and statistics, the UN expert group on migration statistics provided several recommendations for measuring international migration. What does that mean? Let's look at a statistical definition that was put together for this. It starts with any person who is outside of a state of which he or she is a citizen or national, or in the case of a stateless person, his or her state of birth or habitual residence. The term includes migrants who intend to move permanently or temporarily, and those who move in a regular or documented manner, as well as migrants in irregular situations. Now, specifically, a long-term migrant is a person who moves to a country other than that of his or her usual residence for a period of at least a year or 12 months, so that the country of destination effectively becomes his or her new country of residence. So here we already see clear parameters being put into place. In this case, specifically a movement of 12 months or more. We can also more clearly define what usual place of residence or usual residence means. This is the place at which the person has lived continuously for most of the past 12 months. So that is for at least 6 months and 1 day, or for at least the past 12 months. And this is not including temporary absences for holiday or work assignments, or that intends to live for at least 6 months in a certain area. So you can already start to see that within the definition of usual residence, we are starting to have explicit timeframes that help to define who we are measuring. And using this definition, the UN gathers information about who is a migrant and is able to measure migrant stocks around the world. So the international migrant stock is the total number of international migrants in a country in a particular point of time. And this is usually mid-year or end year using the definition that I have already explained. So here is just an example of that. Now, sometimes we also have other definitions for statistical purposes or other stock categories, all right? One of these is looking at the stock of foreign-born persons. So this is the stock of the population born abroad. They were not part of the country at the beginning of their lives. This would basically measure everyone currently living in a country that was not born in that country. So that is another way that you can define for statistical purposes who a migrant is. Another way of defining who a migrant is looking at the stock of foreigners. This is the stock of the population who do not have citizenship of the country of study or of enumeration. So the stock of foreigners is also widely used in countries to represent the stock of immigrants, whereas by definition, virtually all foreign-born persons qualify as immigrants. Many foreigners are not. I can give you a quick example of this. So for this definition, a child born in Germany to non-German parents with no automatic birthright citizenship is a foreigner, but not foreign born. So that child does not automatically get German citizenship, so they would be considered a foreigner, and under the definition of a migrant as a foreigner, they would qualify. But under the definition of a migrant as foreign-born, then they would not be considered a migrant. So you can already see that we have different categorizations and different ways of measuring migrants for statistical purposes. And the definitions that we use for statistical purposes are usually more specified than the common language that we use with regard to who a migrant is. Now, I know this can get a little bit complicated, so I hope that breaking it down a little bit more gives you a better idea of the different types of definitions that can be used and how we use different definitions for different types of statistics. So if you found this video useful, of course, please give it a thumbs up. Feel free to share it around. And if you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the videos that we upload on a regular basis on this channel. And I do hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.